So up here in beautiful North Carolina today, and we have Tobinator the Motivator here.
That is my name, sir.
Tobin runs, he has his own podcast, but today we're going to be talking about fatherhood, what that means, the legacy someone leaves behind. You know, Father Day is coming up here in a couple weeks, and you know, kind of what does that mean? And so your podcast is Three Pillars Podcast, and you cover spiritual, mental, and physical strength, leadership principles, let's say. You know, kind of talk us through a little bit about Three Pillars Podcast, and then we can dive into fatherhood.
Sure, man. So first and foremost, thanks for making the trip up. You've been doing some awesome work with your podcast. Touch grass is a big thing right now. So, you know, calm down, right? Let's get everybody just focus, have a nice, reasonable conversation about current events and things in the world and things that are applicable to life and society. So I appreciate what you're doing. Again, thank you for having me on. I am Chase Tobin, aka Tobinator the Motivator. You were there when that name was monikered when we were in the Marine Corps together. For those of you who don't know, Zeb and I served in the fast companies together back in, 2012
to 15?
15, something like that. So I've known him for a long time. He's a great man. My podcast, like you said, focuses on those three pillars of fitness or strength, spiritual, mental, physical. It really is a holistic approach to help us grow closer to the Lord on our journey we call life. That's my little tagline at the very beginning of every episode. The idea with it is just to kind of have a weekly chat with the audience, kind of whatever's on my mind. Podcasting for me is more of a hobby. It helps me to get my thoughts together. It's my creative outlet.
It's a journal, a daily journal.
It's a journal, or more of a weekly journal.
Journal.
I get in it, try to get an episode once a week and just kind of deliver my thoughts on something that will make you just a little bit better every single day.
Well, that once a week, I don't know about you, but for me, it's a little bit taxing.
Yeah.
Especially given, we work full-time jobs.
Yes.
And we have kids,
yep.
Which is why we're here today. What is fatherhood? What does it mean to you? And then maybe how do we apply the principles of Three Pillars Podcast of spiritual, mental, and physical fitness?
So, with the birth of a child, people have always said, birth of the child is the birth of the mother, because the mother, gives life to the child. But there's another very important aspect of that, and that is the father. And when the child is born, you're all of a sudden a father. Everything you were before, it matters, but it no longer exists, because now you are responsible. You're the caregiver, you're the provider, you're the protector of a new life. And humans are some of the only animal species out there that's young, cannot survive on their own. They have to have somebody to take care of them. And so that's part of the growing up process, the emotional maturity that comes with being a father. You knew me, I was kind of a wild head back in the day. I like to think I was a pretty good dude, but I still was like a little bit nuts to a point. All that changed for me when...
I think we all are when we go through that. I guess we were maybe 21, 22.
Yeah.
A little bit older, but anywhere between that 15 to maybe even 25 range is very
24 when I enlisted.
Rebellious, let's say. Yeah. Okay. So you're a little bit older than me, but I caught the back end of it.
It's something I look back at now, and we can get into this a little bit later. Is why is that? Why do we go on these rebellious streaks? Is it lack of fatherhood in our own lives, or is it lack of guidance from our father? I love my dad. He's awesome. There's things, but just like in the Marine Corps, I learned things from him, good and bad. How do I apply that to my life today? What are the good things I can take and apply and give it to my daughter, my two sons? And what are the things I'm not going to pass on because of X, Y, and Z? And part of that in my life is, not focusing on the purpose I should have had back in the day. Instead of chasing women and beers and being crazy, focus more on my purpose, and the ladies will come later, right? But if I had taken the money that I spent on alcohol and chasing women, I probably could have retired by now, looking back at it. So if I could impart that to my sons, teach them emotional maturity, teach them sexual discipline, teach them how to be good with their money, it'll set them up for success later on. Now, they're going to go through their stuff. Like you said, we're men, we have these rebellious streaks in us. I get that. But how can we I don't want to say stifle it, that's not a good word, but how can we shepherd that tendency toward a more positive outcome?
Yeah. How can we get them to understand that the positive, what are the positive attributes of male role models in general, and specifically fathers, and the negative, and how to learn from a lifetime that isn't yours.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we're building on in general, is when we're, trying to figure out what is true, acquire knowledge, we're building on everybody that's come before us.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, you're a father, I'm a father. I'd say fairly new. My son is 2.5, and you have two that are.
My daughter's 9, my middle son is 6, almost 7.
Okay, so you have 3. Sorry.
My youngest, that's all right. My youngest is he's 3, about to be 4.
I was thinking sons, because when I think fatherhood, I just think father, son. But there's definitely a daughter aspect to it. Maybe we can jump into that real quick and, let's say, kind of get that out the way, because it's completely different.
Yeah. 100%.
What is that father-daughter relationship compared to a father-son relationship?
It's really funny to see it happen in real time. My daughter, when I found out I was having a daughter, I was ecstatic. Whether it was a boy or girl at the beginning, everybody, every man wants a boy first, right? But I was happy that I had that my child had 10 fingers and 10 toes and was going to be healthy when she was born. But the father-daughter relationship is more, I don't want to say nurturing, but it's not as rough. Like for my sons, I pick them up, slam them, body slam them, do the things, go out in the woods, burp, fart, scratch, do that kind of stuff. With the daughter, it's more of, I guess nurturing is more of the mother's role, but it is more of I'm here to help you, I'm here to protect you, I'm reassuring that you need help with your homework, you want to go on a date, right? I'm intentional with all my children, but I'm especially intentional to her.
Maybe it's a protection of innocence.
Yeah.
For her, and less so for the sons, because the world is rough for men.
It is.
And maybe I'll get some slack for this one, but the preference is for women to stay relatively innocent, and I think the exposure to the world in general is rough. It's a lot.
The way I measure success, and this is going to be my measure of success for my sons and my daughter. If I can present my daughter on her wedding day as a virgin, I call that a win, because I have done my duty to protect her, because the world is crazy out there. If I can protect her from the rampant sexuality, sexualization of children, from the OnlyFans, from the TikTok, and I want her to have a creative outlet. If she wants to have a little YouTube channel when she's older and do little crafts and things like that, sure. But to shelter her from the predators that are out there, because they have open access to the internet. You're a Marine, I'm a Marine, we know what we do to bad guys. I'm trying to preserve that with my daughter and teach her values, teach her what a man should be, how a man should treat a woman the way I treat her mother. Polite, respectful, but still very loving and very, I don't want to say lovey-dovey, but show her that you can still love a woman, but not objectify her, if that makes sense. So that her self-worth as a woman, as a young woman, now she's almost 10.
You don't want her to have daddy issues, let's say.
That's exactly, yeah. I guess I'm going this whole roundabout thing to saying I don't want my daughter to have daddy issues.
Yes.
And I think the best way to do that is to show her what it means to be a good husband, a good father, a good man. With my sons, on the other hand, the physical part's going to happen. We're men, we're physical creatures. But to teach them how to be disciplined enough to counteract the things we just talked about that could objectify women. So my measure of success for them is for them to be, after age of 18, to return to the church pew every Sunday. Because I want them to have not only the physical strength, but the mental and spiritual discipline to maintain their relationship with the Lord, but also to focus on their purpose and not so much thinking with the wrong head, if that makes sense.
Yes, it's a verse I quoted last podcast, and it just keeps coming up. It's, this was the verse for our school. I went to high school, went to private school, Christian school, and it was train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're older, they should not depart. That is the all-encompassing what is fatherhood.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
you know, we don't know everything,
No.
but there's a direction that we have to send our sons in, and hopefully during that rebellion age, they should come back
Right.
afterwards.
If you could establish that.
And I did it myself, you know. Who didn't? I think you're an exception if you didn't. I think.
I think that we can, though, break that cycle a little bit. And I think the way you do that is to really establish a firm foundation, not shelter them from the world so much they don't know what's going out there. You know, I homeschool my kids. There's a whole thing about homeschooling kids. They're these unsocialized weirdos. My kids, I could take them out there. You would not know they're the most loving, engaging children you've ever met.
Did you always homeschool your kids, or was that a COVID thing? Because I know there was a massive spike in homeschooling during that crisis.
Alone, I think we now have over 5 million homeschoolers.
North Carolina was pretty rough on COVID.
Depends on where you were in the state. Around here is actually pretty middle of the road politics. Some of the bigger cities, you saw more of the lockdown type stuff, a lot more of the COVID police. But to answer your question, we had always wanted to do that anyways, because when I had my daughter, I was still active duty. So I figured, you know, wherever we're going to be traveling, because at that point I thought I might re-enlist, so who knows where I was going to be. We were just going to homeschool anyways because we could literally do it anywhere. And now I can still do it literally anywhere, and it's the best thing I ever did because I have the freedom to come out here to record a podcast, go to the beach, but still do school while we're down there.
Yeah.
I could take a week-long beach trip and still do my school for a little bit and then kick out and build a sandcastle after.
I think if it didn't take 2 household incomes for a lot of people, there would be more homeschooling.
We're only on one. My wife stays home and educates my kids. What does that mean for me? It means I've had to lace up my boots, tighten my belt, and take that 30-inch step every single day and get to the point where I can support that because of my hard work and efforts. And I just switched jobs recently, and I got a pretty big pay bump, and that's made it a lot easier. But there for a while, it was tough. It's not for everybody. But if you put in the gumption and the work to do it, it is literally one of the best things you can do because you can be more intentional with your children. Homeschooling shouldn't be called homeschooling. It should be called parenting. Because for thousands of years before the Rockefeller public education system came into effect, where they were creating people to go and work in factories for the war effort, you would take your son and you would teach him everything that he knew. The mother would teach them everything that they knew. How do you cook? How do you clean? How do you skin a deer? How do you hunt? How do you keep yourself in shape? How do you... all these things, you would just impart that on them because you were with them every day. And now your kids, you develop an emotional relationship to them. Whereas opposed to you and I went to public school, and I love my parents, everything they did it to the best of their ability. But if you look back at it, for 13 years you were in school from 8 to 3. If you did extracurriculars, you were there till 5 or 7. You come home, you do your homework, you have dinner, and you go to bed, and you do it all over again 5 days a week. So for that, 6-8 hour day, who's raising the kids? Well, the state is. And if they're at one point in the country, if the state's got the same values, and if I know that Mr. Smith in school is got my same values that I have no problem delivering to them. Public education system right now doesn't know what they're doing. They don't know up from down. And I have no problem saying that because I know teachers who have told me they don't know up from down because they are so handcuffed by what they can do, by the discipline that they can enforce, by the policies that they have to enact. They're more of just babysitters rather than educators. And that's sad.
Yeah, the public school system is definitely handicapped by state governments and then federal governments.
Mm-hmm.
The Department of Education should not be federal.
No.
And you're seeing a rise in homeschooling. You're seeing a rise in private schooling. And then you're looking at states like Arizona that have school vouchers,
mm-hmm.
which I'm not extremely informed on, but to me that just seems normal. Like why shouldn't the money follow the kid?
Follow the kid. Yeah, in my opinion, because when you homeschool, I have things out of pocket. I pay for my curriculum, I pay for the supplies, all this stuff, but I'm still paying public school taxes. Now, I know there's a need for public schools. There's kids that need to get in there. They need to be fed. They need to be educated. They need to learn how to read and write. But now that gets back to a parenting issue. Parents should take responsibility because once you start passing the buck on to everybody else, now we've got a problem. The lack of accountability is not there. So if we teach our kids, if we're going to swing back around to fatherhood and being a parent, when you mess up, it is your fault. The accountability stops with you. You know what I mean?
I think the core issue is accountability.
100%.
We have different cultures. We have different standards for each culture, and some of those don't hold the in-group accountable.
Right.
And I think the accountability is the core issue, and we should hold everybody to the same standard. If they can't meet that standard, then there should be, let's say, consequences for action.
100%.
Maybe kind of reeling it back in to your sons, and my son, let's say, he's wide open, man. he's been sprinting since he was 9 months old.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of him. You know, every parent wants to brag about their kid, about how great they are. And you know, I'm not around a ton of other kids, but I do think he's maybe a little advanced in some areas, and maybe some areas not. On the development of the kid, you know, how have you seen that maybe different between each kid, or, you know, compared to some other kids that y'all have been around from like a homeschooling perspective even?
So obviously every child's going to be different. Everybody's got their own tendencies. Everybody's got their own temperaments. The job of the parent is to shepherd that temperament, because you can't change it as much as you want. It's just like leading Marines. You got your leadership
without heavy medication, let's say.
Medication and stuff. If you can shepherd that behavior, that temperament, that, you know, a kid wants to get out and run. Boys are meant to get out and run and move and do things. But if you set them in a classroom all day long, they're going to go stir crazy. And then somebody's going to say, oh, well, you've got ADHD, here's some Ritalin, that'll fix it. That's what they did all throughout the 90s, right? What are the long-term repercussions of that? I don't know yet. We just don't have the data on it. I'm sure it's out there. I'm not, real versed in it, but there's got to be some complication to put that.
I think there's an actual Adderall and Ritalin shortage across America.
And why is
because there's so much prescription going out. Like, people are essentially addicted. I mean, it's an amphetamine.
It is. It's like speed. So it's one of those things. Why do we?
And people can't function without it sometimes. So
they become dependent on it. Is that because farmers got their hand into it, or is that just because that we have no accountability and are just putting a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage? Why don't we just identify the fact that, maybe I need to change my diet a little bit. Maybe I need to actually take a look and see my learning style. Guys are generally kinetic learners, right? So we do things with our hands. You tell me how to do something, I'm like, I need to probably do it with you a couple times, then I'll have it down. But I need to do that with my hands. With little girls, a lot of times they're very visual, and they can learn something real quick just by telling it to them. But like I said, to get back to your question, developmentally, it just depends on the environment, depends on the socioeconomic class, depends on, are you gentle parenting, or are you traditional parenting? There's a lot of things that can. Is there a nature-nurture thing? I think there's a blend of it. I think by nature people are born with temperaments, but by nurture we can shepherd that temperament.
So how do we build that generation that's younger than us? Maybe even, some of the ones that are 18, 19, 20 right now, that are going to have to come up in a post Joe Biden America, let's say.
I think first thing we got to do is be an example. If we're gonna use the Lord as our example as men and as fathers to lead our families, if we can establish that foothold in our family, be an example. And an example is a good man, goes to work, pays his taxes, isn't a menace to society, generally gives back a net gain on society, and then can impart that into their children and then show other men around. And how do you do that? You get involved with a youth group if you can. You get involved with church ministry somehow. You get involved with Boys and Girls Club. You get involved with start a club at a gym. You do something. You start a podcast that they can read and get their knowledge and information from, something that they can go in and reference if they don't have a point of reference. And if you can show other fathers how to be good fathers, not just to be not just to go through the motions. Because a lot of guys you find right now just going through the motions, they have lost a purpose because of X, Y, or Z. They get out of the military, they don't have somebody telling them what to do every day. They get out of law enforcement, they're now, what do I do now? They get out of whatever it is, they lose their purpose. If you can reestablish that purpose and give somebody an identity, and I find an identity rooted in Christ to be the best thing ever, because now you have a purpose, somebody loves you. Now you can take that next step and love others, love a woman. Once you become a husband, now you are providing for that, and then when you become a father, it just levels that up. Now you have to, if you are taking your role seriously as a father, to provide for something. How am I going to do that? Am I working, an entry-level job and now I've got to figure out how to climb that corporate ladder? Well, yeah, you should. Or else you're going to be really, really, really hurting. It's going to put a strain on your marriage. It's going to put a strain on your family. So I think it forces you to level up once you realize this is a serious responsibility. And that gets back to accountability, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very much so. There's a lot going on nowadays, and we're not going to be around forever. They're going to grow up. What do you see in the near future? Obviously, like you said, you homeschool your kids. Are you looking at maybe sending them to college? Would you like them to go into trade work? What are they interested in? How is that generation going to come? I guess, how is the world going to change by the time, let's say, 3 to 8-year-olds, whatever that generation's name is, I don't even know.
Kids right now are Generation Alpha.
Okay.
And they're projected to be the most conservative generation in decades. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. I think what you're going to see in the future is a massive change in the education system. And I think you're going to either see a lot more homeschooling or you're going to see a lot more reverting back to a traditional method of education where there is accountability, not only from the school but on the parents. I think parents are going to start taking a more active role in their kids' education because they're going to see that the standards are going to start slipping in. And if people are just sliming by, and now you have doctors and nurses that are just sliming by, and you have engineers and stuff, you see bridges collapsing, you see hospitals doing things.
Planes falling out of the sky.
Planes falling out of the sky. I don't think we're going to get quite to that point, but the signs are already there. The whole No Child Left Behind thing back in the 90s was a joke because now you're just passing people just to pass people. If you're going to have a standard, people need to meet that standard. I'm proud of the Marine Corps for upholding their standard throughout this entire, COVID nonsense and throughout this whole DEI initiative. They have had a standard. If you want to be a Marine, you have to meet this standard. And by God, they've kept that standard. And they're the only branch to pass a financial audit in the past, like however many years over the past, I think that just happened last year, right? So good on the Marines for doing that. But I think if we return to a standard of excellence, whether that is homeschool or whether that's through a massive change, nationwide, like you said, the Department of Education, maybe it gives it back to the states. I don't know, but I think you're going to see a massive change in that. People are going to actually take this stuff a lot more seriously.
So you made a call back to the Marine Corps and how, they're the only ones past audits. They've, stood firm. That I think that comes from holding each other accountable, and Marines are known for that.
100%.
So now that we, kind of on the military issue, could you see your sons in the military of a post 2020 America? What are we looking at from that standpoint? Because obviously there's some major issues when it comes to some of the Marine Corps too, but primarily, let's say, some other branches.
So I think,
and the Commander-in-Chief himself.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a massive change in the military too. I know everybody talks about the pendulum swinging. I would like to see the pendulum come back to a sense of common sense, kind of a more centrist approach. The military's job is to defend the nation's national interests. We don't need to worry about sexual identity. We don't need to worry about, anything but people's true mental health, and can we win wars and defend our nation's interests. That's the primary goal of the military. I think there will be a shift back to that eventually, but if not, then I don't want my son serving, because why would I want them going into an organization that's not preserving national interests? My son's all about it right now. He asks me every day, what do I need to do to be a Marine? I said, well, when you start running, that means I got to start running.
A lot of running,
right? But I'll train him up to be as best as he can be, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to go into the military, but he'll be ready if he needs to. And maybe at that point, I'm not saying we won't need a military, but maybe we'll need more civilians holding themselves to a higher standard rather than just letting the police and the fire and the EMS and the nurses and the doctors have this high standard. Why can't you and I now as civilians keep ourselves to a high standard? We already are because we're Marines, but average person around you, if they would hold themselves to a higher standard, now you have accountability to your peers around. So there's the college question. Do the kids go to college? We'll see. We'll cross that road when we get there. My daughter's already talking about how she wants to find a nice boy, get married, have children, and be a stay-at-home wife. Good for you, sweetheart.
Yeah, I think that's being a mother is definitely the highest calling for a woman.
1,000%.
We're in a tough spot, I say. You talk about the pendulum swinging, and I think it is too. I think it's swinging back. We're looking at election. We're looking at election polls. We're looking at the rise in MAGA support or Trump support, however you want to put that. We'll see how that goes here in November.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the turning point, one way or the other.
I think so. I have hope, and whoever wins it's going to be nuts. We know that much. I think what you can do in the meantime is to preserve your legacy. So the people having children, one of the most terrifying statistics I've seen, and Elon Musk talks about this all the time, is that the birth rate in America is like 1.4. In order to have a society that continues, you need to have a birth rate of at least like 2.1. And we are far below that. And that's scary. So how do you preserve that? Get married, have babies, commit yourself to one female, commit to that for life, establish a solid physical, spiritual, and mental capacity in your children, and in your marriage. You establish that sphere of influence. If it's a military tactic we're talking about, you establish your sphere of influence. Thank you, Captain Iannaccio, sir, if you're listening to this. And you expand that. Because it was one of the things I distinctly remember him saying. We established our defensive posture, and then we expand it as we can. And if we can do that from our home, to our neighborhood, to our community, to our city, to our county, to the state level, it's infectious. But you might have these little pockets at first, but it starts in the home.
When you say, expand your sphere of influence,
Yep.
I would say that sphere of influence is specifically Christianity, culture of Christianity, and Christ himself. And that spreads throughout the home, and then the city, county, state, nation. And
it's about love, man, but it's also about righteous abhorrence of evil.
Well, we're watching the downfall of America. I mean, we are.
America, if you look at it biblically, I think America's being judged. I think if you want to get into the spiritual with it, I think Joe Biden is exactly who we needed right now, because people, okay, this is what you want, have at it. Okay? And we see that there's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now. There's a lot of, illegals crossing the border. There's a lot of inflation. My house has gone up. I don't know how much is a good thing, but should it really do that? No. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of food plants dying. There's a lot of planes falling out of the sky. People are looking at it like, I don't know about this. Well, Trump's not the savior, he's not the Messiah by any means. But I think it's a step in the right direction if more people would, again, have that accountability and really have love for country and really demand that the politicians in office stop sending our money everywhere but where it needs to go here in the country. You might see a massive, you might save the republic, if you will.
Yeah, so, we are where we are. We can't go back and change how we got here.
Yeah.
We can acknowledge what we did wrong, and we can, wish upon a star, let's say. But moving forward, and we can have an ideal. I think that's what the ideal is. Let's say Christian nationalism. At least, I would ascribe to that, as defined by somebody like Stephen Wolfe. Are you caught up on any kind of Christian nationalism? What do you perceive as an ideal moving forward?
I think that's a good basis to start. I think those cats like the libertarians have a good idea, but I don't think they've got enough. They haven't shrunk their guardrails enough that they want this whole broad funnel of, have a crusade in America and go back and be this militant force, but you're not going to win souls over by beating them in the head with the Bible. The Muslims did it, and they conquered, whatever, but they did it by fear. So is that really bringing people to heaven? No. But if you do it through love, and you do it through, again, righteous abhorrence of evil, calling out the things that expose it, find the deeds of darkness and expose them to the light. Okay, is there human trafficking in the country? Yes. How does that happen? We got a border that's open that people are coming across to expose it, call it out. Is there corruption in politics? Yes. Call it, expose it, root it out. But you can do that in a place of love, because I love this country. I love what we're doing. I love what we got going on. But trying to wave that banner and charge into it, you're just going to get a bunch of people looking at you like, what are you doing, crazy? I think again, it's a good idea. But I think they need to shrink their guardrails and really focus on it, and not just have a bunch of guys wearing jackets. Hey, let's go out and do this. Are those guys married? Do they have families? Do they have children? Are they instilling in that, or are they focusing all their time in their little club?
I think you mentioned libertarians. I think they're definitely broad. They're very, let's say, accepting. And you can see that with the Libertarian Party, and that's the ideology. I think the fundamental issue with that is that they believe that people are inherently good.
Yeah.
And I don't think we believe that. No. We believe people are inherently bad, and you have to work and put effort towards doing good.
Yeah.
And so you talk about the pendulum swing, and you talk about trying to find a middle and common sense. What is, because I don't believe there is a real, let's say, middle. Right. I mean, there's obviously common sense, but what does that even mean?
I think,
because I mean, people would call me extreme right. And I don't know.
You're just a traditional guy from 50 years ago.
I'm a fundamentalist, man.
Yeah.
I can look back and see where we went all wrong, and it's like, we just have to go back to the basics.
I think that you've got a fringe group on the far right and a fringe group on the far left that are screaming at each other, who want the people who are generally in the middle, who want to just be left alone, to fight their battles for them. Because they don't have the numbers over here, but they're screaming the loudest, and they're getting the attention because the media is giving the attention. Whereas on the other side, it's the same thing. They want you to make believe that this divide is so much that there's no common ground whatsoever. I think there's plenty of common ground. In America, the beauty of America is you can have somebody who's, say, a Democrat, but be 2A, all about it. You can have people who are conservative, but then they say they're pro-choice. That is just the nature of America. You don't have to be so staunch Republican or so staunch Democrat that you toe that party line on everything. I think you will find commonality in a lot of stuff. Can people have the conversations?
Do you think that we're getting away from that? I feel like we're getting away from that with the conformity to an ideology, to pick teams.
Hurt. Yeah, they don't want to say something that's going to hurt their, quote, party's feelings. You got to hurt people's feelings. You got to have the tough conversations. You got to sit down with somebody who's across the aisle from you and have rational conversations, not screaming matches. Don't bring on the I love some of the influencers out there. They'll bring just the most like ridiculous person from the left, and most of the time they're actually like a satire person anyways, but they'll sit there and have a conversation with them, and it's just like, come on, they're not all like that. And they're not. Most people on the left, on the right, they can sit down like you and I are doing right now and have a good conversation and find that common ground. And I think if you get away from federal politics, get it back to more local politics where stuff actually matters, and take power from the federal government, shrink it to the point where all they need to do is defend my borders, control my foreign policy with imports and exports and stuff, and leave me alone. That's where the libertarians get it right. But I think their inherent issue is that they are 100% Constitution with zero Christian morality. That's where they deviate from. If they had, again, more guardrails, more focus, you might have more.
How do we get back to that? To, let's say, establishing the Constitution, because obviously it's a dead document right now. I mean, over half of your politicians don't even hold it to authority anymore.
They're too worried about the next election. I think you have to really get people in office that are statesmen, that are not politicians. People that are worried about doing their job in the moment and not worried about that next election until it's election time. I think you have to have congressional reform. I think you need, you're going to need some type of term limit. You're going to need some type of age limit. You're going to have to have some type of rule where if I'm a senator, I can't run for the next office until my tenure's up. If I'm a lieutenant governor, I can't run for governor until my term is up. Things like that, because that means you're doing half your job when a time comes. I think little things like that, and really advocating for things like that, and really doing more local stuff is going to be your money maker in the end. Because if the republic falls and we end up balkanizing for some reason, you're going to have these little pockets of cohesion that are going to have to form some kind of government.
Yep. Yeah, you're talking about bringing it back to the localization and the local community, and I think inevitably that's where we're going to end up. I don't know how long it's going to take to get there. Maybe there's a fallout completely. Maybe there's a civil war. Maybe there's a splitting up of states. Maybe there's a new secession. But kind of mentioning all that, a lot of people want to call back to the fall of Rome. Yeah. You're halfway learned on that subject. What are the similarities? What are the differences? And what can we learn from them?
Well, if you just look back at it, one of the first things is just all the crazy laws that they had in Rome. bring it up on a spot offhand. I can't think of anything to hail back to, but I know that they kept making laws upon laws, and this law counteracted this law, and so on and so forth. It became so confusing that only the people in power could navigate it. Does that sound familiar? We have lawyers to interpret law. We have realtors to interpret real estate. We have these specialized professions in places that probably shouldn't be that complicated. You've got you've got the games. People are distracted. Juvenal said you give them bread and circuses and they'll never revolt. If we're constantly in a state of entertainment, the plebes, as it were, they're constantly, anybody pushing universal basic income has never read a history book, because if you just keep people in a docile system, that's a control mechanism, and it might be good for the people who want the control, but it's not good for everybody else in the long run. If you're pushing for a true socialist or communist system, it's never worked and never will. So when you see like the fall of the empire, it's overexpanded its borders. It's got its hands in too many things. It's not manufacturing anything. It's not exporting anything. If you look at it today, we are not energy independent. We rely heavily on China for our manufacturing, and a lot of other, who's not our friend per se, right? And we're stretched so thin militarily all over the place. We're sending money to all these different countries, and while our people are starving in our own country. So there are parallels between the great Roman Republic that fell, and the American experiment or republic, as it were. And I think you can save it if you go back to a more isolationist mentality, just like George Washington said when he left office. Be aware of your foreign allies, keep an isolationist mentality, get involved only when absolutely necessary. We got enough land and resources and stuff here in America. We can build a wall, 10 feet tall around the entire country and just do our own thing here and not worry about the rest of the world.
Yeah.
We have been dubbed the world police by somebody at some point, that we have to get our hands on all these things. You got NATO, you got things like that. Let them handle all these issues. But NATO was formed just to defeat the Soviets. They're
For the
gone.
Cold War. Yep.
So what does NATO do now? Is that a fair question to ask?
Still a Russian aggressionist.
Still a Russian aggressionist organization, but do they actually do anything, or they just put their foot down? So you better not cross this line.
Well, I know they collect funding.
They collect funding.
Who doesn't collect funding from America?
What do they do with that? So that's the thing. Overly taxing your people, sending money that you tax from people to faraway lands that people can't find on a map. There's some parallels to that in the Roman Empire, and it eventually fell due to a peasant rebellion and nomadic invaders from the north. Was it the Vandals that sacked Rome finally? And they took all their architecture and destroyed it. That's where we get vandalism from. It's the Vandals, and that might not have been the form.
And Rome retreated to the Vatican.
And then Rome retreated to the Vatican and restocked there. But that's a whole other episode, I think. but I think the way you save the Republic, I think, is again, if we're going to circle back to our topic of fatherhood, is being that example. If you follow Christ and his example and how he is firm but fair to you, he's disciplined, but he also loves you at the same time. Impart that into your children, impart that to your wife and your kids, and then expand that out as best you can.
Yeah, a thought I've had before, and maybe I heard it, maybe I did, I don't know, kind of going back to fatherhood, is what do you want for your sons? At least my perspective is I want my sons to be me, but better.
Yes.
And I think that should be the fundamental guiding principles.
Just like leading Marines, man, I learned a lot in the Marine Corps, and I know you did too. If the guy who took my place when I left could do everything I do except better, I have done my job. And that's your legacy. And that's, if we're gonna kind of wind down talking about legacy, that's who your kids are. That's your future. Every baby born is a sign from God that he's not done with us yet. So give that child everything they can to succeed. Don't just do everything for them, but teach them the best you can. Make them the way they need to be, and then, again, shepherd their temperament to what they're good at. Both my boys may not like baseball, let's say, for example. I know one's more interested in soccer right now. Well, maybe one likes soccer, one likes baseball. I'm not going to force them to do something they don't want to do if they're not good at it. I'm okay with saying, I'm okay, I don't play basketball because I'm terrible at it. And I would hope my father never said, "Oh yeah, he was a great basketball player," because I'm not. I had a basketball hoop, but I'm never good at it, right? But if you can impart that into your children and establish that legacy, your name's going to carry down through the ages.
You talking about legacy, and kind of carry your name down through the ages. I think we've lost the sense of self-preservation as let's say a community, as a people group, and you can label that group whatever you want to. But, we've kind of gone through Rome. We've talked about our founding fathers. We've talked about, all these people that have come before us. That's their legacy that they have left for us to build on. And I think, it's our job to put an effort towards what is our legacy.
Yeah.
And so, how do we get that self-preservation back?
If you start...
Because it seems lost.
If every family had 5 backyard chickens and a little victory garden, you would lessen the dependency on the government. I don't know a percentage, but you wouldn't have as many food supply issues. Right?
Get a big chicken and a couple in the garden.
You know what I mean? If the government really cared about the people, they would help subsidize that. Say, hey, yeah, if we can get you guys all chickens and a garden, grow your own stuff, and we'll teach you how to do it. And if every little, yard or hamlet or whatever you want to call it, had their own little source, and you didn't have to worry about raiders coming and sacking your little house. That's in a very microcosm of it all. But if you can teach people to become less dependent on somebody else.
And I bring that up because, my grandma just turned 90 this past year.
Mm-hmm.
She's a little bit older, and her father had her when he was later in life. So he was born in, I can't remember, like 1883.
Wow.
So, she was born in the 30s, and he had her at like 47 or something. That's a lot of history that's going to die with her if it's not, let's say, recorded.
Yeah.
And so I've recorded an episode or two with her to kind of, give some stories on what they're looking at, because, I've had some cousins that have been asking, what is, give us some idea of what our grandfather and great-great-grandfather or great-grandfather have, what they were like. And so I think there's definitely a callback at our generation to what was it like, what were our fathers like, what were our grandfathers like, and great-grandfathers, and kind of moving this thing forward. Obviously we notice that there's no self-preservation. I keep going back to that, and the nation is a extension of self, let's say.
If you can get people away from self, though, the whole selfie generation, right? If people would care more about, hey, where did I come from? How did I get here? And what do I need to do to carry on this thing? Rather than it all just ends with me. It's all focused around me. The whole world revolves around me. You see that a lot.
I think that's self-preservation and selfishness is antonym.
Yeah.
I think they're complete opposites.
Wildly different. And I think that's the goal is to preserve the self, which if we're going to call the collective self America, we have to get away from what can you do for me? What can I do for you? Just like Kennedy said, that's not what your country can do for you. What can you do for your country? Are you a net positive on the country, or are you a net negative? Are you constantly asking for something, or are you creating something, putting something out there to make other people better? I don't know. I think that is how you get. It's how can I be a net positive and preserve my family tradition and carry that on into the next realm. I think that's what part of what
self-preservation should definitely be a priority.
Yeah.
And
you got to preserve the society and the culture. The thing about American culture is, again, we've got this big wide funnel, this melting pot tapestry or whatever. I think people would really embrace that to a point. It's like, hey, yeah, we all come from all these different places, but we built this thing, and it's awesome. And if we don't want to lose it, we need to do everything we can to protect it.
I think what is American culture is an entire podcast by itself.
Yeah.
But kind of, getting back to the core of this, Father's Day is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to say to the fathers? We can kind of close this up, and like I said, I'll link to your podcast in the description and where people can find you. So, what do you have to say to fathers? Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, specifically mine. because he is mine.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm definitely glad to have him as a father. But yeah.
What I would tell fathers is accept your mistakes because you're going to make them. Own them, because when your kids see that, they'll learn how to deal with their own mistakes later on down the line. Don't ever promise something you're not going to deliver on. Don't say, yeah, I'm going to take you to the movies and put it off. If you say, I'm going to take your kid to the movies on Friday, take you to the movies on Friday. If you always beat them in a foot race, so always keep yourself physically strong, so that way when they want to start running, you can always beat them. And be intentional with them. Your boys, your girls, your wife, your family. Be as intentional as possible with your family, and let them know that Daddy loves them.
Yeah.
Because even though we can be stern, we can be assertive, we can be aggressive, we can be the disciplinarians, at the end of the day, I do all of this from a place of love because I want you to succeed. But you're not gonna. You got to be their guardrails. You can't succeed if you're going off the rails, right? So I think that's. If I had to deliver a message, I would say just be intentional and coming from a place of love with it. That makes sense.
Real quick, when I was getting older, every year me and Daddy would wrestle on my birthday, and that physical challenge of I'm still Daddy, or even as an older brother, I would always tell my brothers that I'm still a big brother, even though one's outweighing me by like 150 pounds. But challenge your sons to be better, 100%. And I think at least that's where I'm coming from. And I think that's where you're coming from also.
Keep them strong, keep them challenged. Even the dad, the daughter dads out there, keep them challenged. Keep them engaged with their mothers. Keep them engaged, and show them what it means to be a good father and a good husband. Because that's what they should be looking for in a man later on in life too. Is be that example. Not that they want to marry Daddy, but they want to have a man that's going to take care of me like my dad took care of my mom.
Absolutely.
And I think that's going to bring everything kind of back full circle, man.
Well, thank you for coming, dude.
Hey, man. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it, sir.